What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is an accomplished hospitality leader with around 15 years of experience. He's driven by the potential to reimagine the real estate and hospitality landscape. He believes that both old and new properties alike can be transformed into engaging and thoughtful spaces. He co-created the Fairlane Hotel in Nashville and Hotel Clermont in Atlanta, which were both #1 ranked hotels in their respective markets, and many more. He's a managing partner and co-founder of Oliver Hospitality. Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan Orley. Welcome, Ethan.
Thank you, Dan. Thanks for having me.
And full disclosure here, I don't remember if Fairlane was one of your first hotel. Was it one of your first, second?
It was our third, second or third. The Oliver was the first.
Yep. And I remember doing that project, which is kind of right off Printer's Alley in Nashville, did the furniture there. And it was so awesome because you took this, I guess it was an old bank and brick and in a place, and it was before Nashville. Nashville was like just starting to like really ramp up in the zeitgeist of Taylor Swift and everything. And I think you really reimagined that place and like created so much value and such a really cool experience.
Well, it was funny because Phil, my partner and I, we did the Oliver in Knoxville back in 2010, and he came to me, I think a year later, maybe at some point, and said, "Hey, we should do a project in Nashville. There's an old office building downtown, and we should do a boutique hotel." At that point, there was only the Hutton Hotel, and there was nothing downtown in the historic core. And we pitched this to a few people. They're like, "Wait, Nashville and downtown, really?" It was very early, and it took us a couple of years between financing and convincing enough folks to kind of get on board. So we were early in the kind of fantasy of it all. It took us a couple of years to execute on it.
Yeah. Well, you were right place, right time, and also just a complete reimagination of that property from I just remember like a dark kind of weird 80s bank lobby, right? And then you turned it into the Fairlane. And so it was a complete reposition. But before we get into that one, and I think actually it's a great segue into the big question we always ask here, but as it pertains to how you've transformed buildings, neighborhoods, properties, how do you define hospitality, number one? And number two, how does that help in your search for the perfect projects?
Great question. I look at hospitality as a canvas in which to really put forward the best product and service in front of a guest who, frankly, just needs ultimately just needs a commodity of sort. You need privacy, a bed, and a hot shower, if you will. And so we try to really exceed that in both areas by enhancing the service to something that you might not expect and something you can take home with you. So there's that kind of theatrical piece of it where we want to just wow the guest. We want them to be like, "Wow, I love what they did with the rooms. I've never been to a hotel like this before. I've never seen someone transition a building this way. I've never been served this way. I've never had this type of food before." Or wow, the pillars were fantastic. I want to take these home with me. We love the canvas of boutique hotels, especially being independent, because it gives us the flexibility to truly reimagine buildings and reimagine the experience one could have in an overnight capacity. And that goes for restaurants as well. They truly are just one-off, one-of-a-kind art projects, and that's how we treat them.
Um, so if the guests love it so much and they want to take the pillows home with them, do they just stuff them in their bag and go, or is there like a reorder that they can do?
It's funny. When when we opened our first hotel, I think it was like the first month that we were open. We had no idea what we were doing.
Wait, which
This was
one? Which hotel? Bring
this
us.
was the Oliver Hotel in Knoxville back in
Got it.
2010, and I remember our GM calling me, be like, "We're missing all the pillows and towels from one of the rooms." This was like the first month that we were open, and the GM called the guest, and the guest came back that afternoon, opened their suitcase, and all the pillows and towels came out of their luggage. And
Oh my
so
gosh.
every so often they do take it home with them. And if you do, we're happy for you to. We'll just have to charge you on the way out.
That's a great metric for successful design, I think. Like, are they taking the accessories out of the room?
Well, our matchbooks at the Hotel Clermont, when you open them up, they say, it says, please do steal. So, it's a good sign when they take all the collateral. It means you've done something well. And it's the price of being memorable.
Who designed the Oliver in Knoxville when you did that one?
That was Courtney Bishop, who was a residential designer out of Charleston, and it was her first hotel project, and we brought her in to do the interior design.
Cool.
It was very much a collaboration with her and our just off the shelf know-how. It was a very meager budget at the time. I'll leave it at that.
Well, but those experiments actually, I always like to call them those crucibles where you don't know what kind of amalgam is going to come out of the other end. And now you've been on this path of repositioning some really awesome properties. And to think like Nashville's always been a cool place. It's kind of like it's gone parabolic, I guess you could say, in the past 5-7 years or so. But when you're like, when you first found the Fairlane as this old office building, and actually, let's not limit it to the Fairlane. Is there a thread through all of those early projects that you did, from the experimental Oliver Hotel in Knoxville to like, okay, you got your feet under you, you know what you're doing, you're delivering value for all of your stakeholders, from investors to the team to the community. Like, is there a thread that if you were to pull on it, it brings all those together in like something that's like your unique special sauce, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's the challenge. I think at the end of the day, we're certainly motivated by money returns. That's for the investors, they're ultimately looking for a return of their dollars. So, Philip and I have a real estate finance background together, and so we look at projects, at least from a real estate standpoint. At first, you got to make sure you're structured correctly. With the right canvas, you can build anything off of that. If you have a bad structure in place, then you're in trouble, no matter how pretty the product is. So that's one piece of the puzzle, is really having a real estate hat on at the very beginning. The other half is really the imaginative, artistic, creative, and most of all, the challenge. I really think that Philip and I have done projects that either nobody else thought to do, people were naysayers, and I think we just like to kind of either prove others wrong, or we like to just turn something on its head and just try something that nobody else has. The examples given. And by the way, I'm sure anybody else you have on this program would probably say the same thing. I mean, if you do what everybody else does, you're not going to necessarily hit it out of the ballpark, because the market has a way to adjust pricing to if it's already kind of plumb. We look for things that we can really change. So the Oliver in Knoxville, there was never a boutique hotel downtown. There hadn't been one for 30 years, since the World's Fair in 1981. And we bought the building. It was going to be slated for condo development. This was just off the recession, 2010. And so that was the challenge of taking a 28-room hotel that nobody else said could work, because who was going around trying to do 28-room hotels? Typically, they're much larger to scale up your fixed cost. The Clermont, was on the wrong side of the tracks. It had a world famous burlesque club in the basement called the Clermont Lounge. It had a storied history of being an hourly hotel. It had all the things that made it probably the most challenging hotel deal ever. It was a great case study, for any college course in hotel development. The Fairlane was a challenge because it was a unusual floor plate in a town that, again, had not had another boutique since Union Station and the Hutton downtown. And I can kind of go on and on. We are actually in the middle of a project called At Marconi, which we can talk at great length about. We could probably have about five podcasts on unto itself. It's got such a kind of storied past itself. But that's in Northern California, and that is a state historic park that really was never a successful hotel.
Which park is it near?
So it's actually on Tomales Bay between
Oh.
Point Reyes and Bodega Bay, about an hour and 15 minutes north of San Francisco.
That's one of my favorite places in the world / country. And it's like, it exists in such like a little, like a fantasy bubble, right? It's like you get there and you're in another misty world, and it's so close to San Francisco, but it's also just like you've stepped into you feel like you're not in the I guess the urban air, like, I don't know, within like an hour and a half radius of downtown. It's like a very special, unusual place.
It is. I got back from California last night. I drove at 7 a.m. yesterday morning to San Francisco, and the fog rolling over the hills. I mean, I've never been to Loch Ness, but I would just imagine that this is kind of like what it looks like. Just like you feel like some prehistoric animal is going to come out of the water. It is just the most astounding place. And little known fact, Point Reyes is the coldest point in the continental U.S. in the summer.
Really?
Northern California.
Well, that's now living just 2 miles from, or maybe not 2, maybe within 5 miles of Mark Twain's final resting place up here in Connecticut, and he has a library up there. But there's this one famous line he always said: "The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco." So,
there you go. That's it.
So there we go. It's because of Point Reyes. Well, that's a really magical place, and I'm excited. So basically, if what I'm hearing you and Philip are really sadists, and you really are gluttons for punishment because you want to roll up your sleeves, buy well, put in a lot of imagination and reposition, but somehow your hair has managed to not turn super gray since I've known you. You're looking good.
It's all appearances, Dan. I'm jello on the inside.
Well, I want to just peel back on that one thing, because I know you said that you and Philip both have real estate finance backgrounds. Like, where were you both working before you took the entrepreneurial leap?
So I'm from suburban Detroit. Philip is from Clarksville, Tennessee, and Philip was the guy in college who bought an old house and fixed it up, and was smarter than the rest of us.
Yes. I love those people.
We all wish we were that guy. And I graduated college and ended up working for my family real estate business, which was in residential development. And it really, frankly, didn't appeal to me. And I wanted to work on historic projects, creative projects, urban projects. And so I moved to New York City. We both met at NYU, doing a graduate program in real estate finance back in 2005 and 2006. And so we both went our separate ways after graduate school. He ended up working for a developer in the city. I ended up working for a company buying debt on commercial properties. And it was really the catalyst of the recession, where we both frankly lost our jobs, or whatever we were being paid wasn't appealing enough to stick around. And we were both, I think we were just playing tennis one day, and I said, what are you working on? And he said, well, I'm trying to buy, a bunch of apartments that all went back to the bank, which was the case back in 2009, 2010. And I said, let's try to do something together. So we actually started our business buying apartments. And I think we had, his mother actually ran a bed and breakfast, and I had done a good amount of traveling internationally in my youth, and I loved hotels. I loved the idea of travel. And for me, even before I met Philip, the idea of building, owning, operating hotels was kind of a way to stay in the travel business, if you will. If you build them, you have to travel to them. You can at least justify the trip. And so I'd always kind of fantasized about this, this idea of, as maybe we all do to some degree, this idea of, okay, I'm going to go and we're going to build this great hotel, and, it's going to be on some cool hiking path on the side of a mountain, and it's going to be on some island somewhere, and it's going to be by a mountaintop. And so you get to have all these great experiences. We haven't achieved that yet. And by the way, that sounds pretty exhausting right about now. However, it was because of Philip's background with his mother and my interest that he approached me after we bought our first apartment deal with, hey, there's a boutique or a hotel for sale. It wasn't a boutique. It was an independent hotel. I'll keep it at that. In Knoxville. What do you say? And neither one of us had ever worked in a hotel, had ever acquired a hotel, and everyone told us it was a terrible idea. We went ahead anyway. We bought the building for a very reasonable sum of money. We raised money from friends and family. We couldn't even raise the last 5% of the capital, so we had to roll our fees back into it. And we started off with, buying the mini shampoos, the mini toothbrushes ourselves, and placing them in the rooms. And we hired our first GM, and just kind of learned the business over the course of 1 or 2 years, opening our first bar called Peter Kern Library, PKL short. And then we brought.
And where was that?
This was all in Knoxville.
All at the Oliver. Okay, got it. Okay.
This is all the Oliver. So really, the hotel was a first. Then we opened a bar, which was our first opportunity there. Then we opened up our first restaurant called Oliver Royale, and each one of those was a first. And it was just kind of good luck, good design, right place, right time. And I'll share with you a fun little story that I like to just tell myself.
When you're
going to sleep, it makes me realize how much more everything has gotten, how much more expensive everything has gotten. But we did our bar. We built that bar for $30,000.
Wow.
And the way we did that was there was a going out of business sale for a restaurant up the street. So I went to the auction, bought all the stainless steel appliances, and hired 6 fraternity brothers, because the University of Tennessee is down the street. I paid them with a 6-pack of beer. They walked the equipment down the sidewalk, and we placed it into our space. The most expensive piece of that bar, Dan, is this Japanese wallpaper. I think it cost us $5,000, which was crazy at the time. And so, without any advertising, and it being 600 square feet, it's successful. And I think it was that kind of like bootstrap mentality, and just like we don't know any better. There's nothing like this in town. We saw a bar like this in New York City. I think it could work here. It was that naivety, and just the fact that we didn't overspend, and we had patient partners, that it gave us the runway for real success in that market, and then the launch pad to do hotels elsewhere.
So that's, yeah. I mean, basically, if you buy well and you stay on or under budget, and then you can deal with all the people and not lose your mind, it could turn into a great investment. And that's kind of where I'm intrigued by that, because I know a lot of people who start off in finance, right? And whether it's private equity real estate, whatever, and they're doing financial models and financial engineering and they're making it work. But oftentimes I find that when they want to go be the entrepreneur and start the business and have to start not dealing with spreadsheets and dealing with people, and hotels have a lot of people, just from obviously everyone operating it to building it to the community around. And it's, it's a whole different ball game. And how did you go through that decision tree to kind of stay on target once you dealt with all the people? Because oftentimes what I find is people who come from a finance background, when they start having all these people and they're bootstrapping, so to speak, they pack up their tent and go away. Like what made you and Philip kind of lean into the people part of it? Because that's like the real magic, because it's all people that make it all happen.
Well, I'll be honest with you. If that 28 room hotel that we started with was 280 rooms, we would have ended up with a larger management company, and we never would have started our own management group, so to speak. And by the way, when I say management group, it was me and Philip working in our little efficiency apartments in New York or elsewhere, and just trying to direct traffic. So it wasn't much of a company. We were doing our own payroll at the time, and Philip was doing the accounting. So really, we had no choice but to get into it because it was such a small property. And we knew that nobody else would try to save a nickel the way we tried to save a nickel. You know what I'm saying? So we had to man the cash register. And so I think it was really just a function of that. And we learned as we went along, and we both liked the details. I think I like the details more than Philip. We both have our strengths and weaknesses. And I like to get into the stuff and pick those little, odds and end operating supply and equipment pieces that most people could care less about. I love the branding. I built the first website. I like working with all those individuals. I don't think I'd be great behind a front desk. I'd probably talk to the guests too long, and we keep people waiting. But we got involved because we had no choice. And once we got into it, we realized that, frankly, from a finance standpoint, from just an investment standpoint, when you invest in a hotel, you can make fees on the front end. Then you can, wait until you pay back your investors and, hit their preferred investment. And there's maybe a split. There's some kind of capital moment, 3 or 4 years later during a refinancing, you eventually sell it. But in the in-between moments, there tends to be very, very little cash flow. So if you left your job and you decide to go open a hotel and you don't manage it, there's probably not going to be very much income along the way, and you've got to support a family. In my case, I had at that point, I just had 2 young kids, and I had to create some income. So the management side of the business actually allowed us to have some operating cash flow along the way that we would have given up to somebody else.
Yeah. And again, it's bootstrapping and all of those things that you're talking about. But again, another interesting thing is, for those people who are in finance and they experience the people part and they're either leaning into it or running away, it's very rare that the partnerships are as enduring as you and Philip, right? And I think that that's also a testament. Like, yeah, you can do it alone, but if you can somehow find a partner to lean on and go through the ups and downs and stick together again, but you are gluttons for punishment in a way. Maybe that's what kept you both together. Like, how did you guys realize that you were great for each other? And then did you have any like prenuptials before getting into it, so that you had you could pull the ripcord and still appreciate each other if it wasn't going to work out? Like, how did you navigate that whole thing for the long road?
That's the $1 million question. So somebody told me a couple of years ago, they said, well, if you've been partners for over 10 years, you'll probably last at least another 10 years together. And I was like, that's probably a pretty good point. If it was going to break up, it would have already broken up. Partnerships are marriages. I'm very happily married. But anybody who is married, or in whatever partnership you're in. I mean, it's work. And Philip and I have our highs and lows like any partnership, but I think what keeps us together is ultimately trust, honesty, integrity. I know when he does things, he does it for our collective kind of best interest, and he does. He knows that, at least I believe he thinks the same of me. So that is the basis. If you got to look over your shoulder, it's probably a pretty bad sign. We also work very hard. He works hard. I work hard. And I think what attracted me to Philip at the very beginning was I thought he was one of the smartest, kind of thoughtful people, creative minds that I had met. And everything was just a puzzle. Oh, I do this and you structure this way and we add this to it. And I'm like, oh, well, that actually, when you break it down, it makes a lot of sense. So, I think I tend to work more on the creative operational side. I also do a lot of our capital raising on the equity side. Philip has always done more the debt structuring, property acquisition. He's got a great set of eyes. And really kind of between, Philip buying the property and then it kind of goes to me to pull the team together, set the branding, and work with the interior designers. We end up kind of all, the whole thing falls into place, right? So, one person's good at, making dinner. The other person is great at tutoring the kids. And we all kind of just work in this dynamic, crazy atmosphere. We are 50-50 partners. We have at this point, over a 20-person corporate team, over 300 people working with us across 6 operating hotels in 4 states. Wow. And it somehow all works together.
I love it. I remember in the Fairlane before you started demoing, I believe it was before you started demoing, going in there and there was like 3 or 4 of you because you were putting your offices in there. And I was like, it was so cool. Like now it's amazing to have seen your growth. I think a surprising thing I just learned about Philip from you, which shows me, because if I compare his type, and I'll get to the type in a second, to other people that I know like him, they are the smartest people in the world, because the ones who are in college that buy the house and renovate it and either rent it or flip it while they're in college, they win.
Right. Totally.
They really win.
Yeah.
Wow. And now I'm going to have to I think some of my kids and their friends listen to this, and I feel like I just need them to know that when they're in college, try and get a duplex or a fourplex, renovate it, rent it out, and go. And then you can either keep it or sell it or 1031 it into something else. And that's a good path forward.
It's funny. All through college, all I wanted to do was buy a place and fix it up. I love fixing old things. I love just, I wanted to be in business for myself, probably at least since high school. And the funny thing is that I tend to be a little bit cynical, skeptical. There's too many opportunities. I get lost in the jean store kind of thing. Too many different cuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so Philip would say, okay, well, this is the cut, but it's not exactly the right size. Figure it out. And so I'm the fixer. If you give me a problem, I'll stay up 24 hours and I will figure out how to get it right sized. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how we work together. He finds the problem. And I'll usually jump in and try to fix get to the solution. So we work in tandem that way. It's fun.
And it's interesting because when you were saying how when you first were starting, you would do the website, you would do this. So you're like the tinkerer. You want to figure it out and you're going to find the best way. I feel like that's me too. I like when presented with a challenge, any kind of challenge, I like solving it. Like for instance, when we did the furniture at the Fairlane, I remember things went in storage for a while because it was delayed. And then there was all this cloudy finish. And I went back to, and the factory was like, oh, the packaging attacked the lacquer. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? That doesn't happen. And they wouldn't pay for it. And I was like, I need to figure out a way to do this, make the doors, I'm going to make it right and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, I need to be presented with a challenge and I'm going to find a way to shine. And, but I do appreciate how on the Philip side, he's like, he'll find the challenge. And that's a really good Venn diagram for a partnership. When you look at the process of finding a property that needs some TLC, and then you look at all the different stages of where you add value from the purchase to the reposition to the operation and maximizing the operational cash flows to exit. Like, where do you think that you and Philip add the most value to your investors? Like, if I were an investor looking at a project that you were looking to do, where does most of the value come from your partnership with Philip?
The adage that it was told to me many of times growing up was, you make all your money at the buy. You can't, the only thing you can control is your entry point.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost what it's going to cost to renovate. You can be skillful, and we've worked with, we tend to work with kind of roving crews. We don't always end up with the kind of white shoe GCs. We're a little bit kind of we're bootstrappers, ourselves and sometimes the folks we hire, and just to save a few dollars, and to be kind of creative and a little more kind of speedier to the finish. But the buy is important, and as we all know, you can't predict timing.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to buy, when we started, so the Oliver was in Knoxville, total tertiary market, still a tertiary market, but now all of a sudden it makes more sense, especially post-COVID. You give somebody an option to invest in a second, an Asheville or Chicago. I'm just trying to think of a good example here, or Savannah. And maybe even in Knoxville, they might say, you know what, we'd like to be in those markets. Urban, tertiary is the new kind of cool kid, because of the work from anywhere mentality. So we got lucky in buying in markets like Knoxville. Nashville is just dumb luck. Atlanta was interesting. Atlanta is a top market, right? So it's I don't know if it's the largest, the second largest city in the Southeast relative to, I guess, Miami. But you're talking about a market that, if I recall, had 85,000 hotel rooms post Olympics, and so they did not need another hotel, and they did not need two guys, working out of their efficiency apartments. Just buying an old hotel, and to what we brought, Philip and I asked ourselves, why us? And what we determined was Atlanta has a ton of money and a ton of very, very accomplished developers.
Totally.
And what happens within our own cities, and I see this happen in Nashville, where I don't see what other people see, and so I've missed out on a ton of opportunities here locally. Is I think the average developer in Atlanta said, we develop along Peachtree, we develop in Buckhead. Nobody has ever gone, east on Ponce. On Ponce, that's a no-go zone. My parents didn't go there. I'm not going to go there. Wrong side of the tracks. Too much hair on it. And by the way, we can just go buy a piece of a greenfield and develop something ground up, which is what we always do, And that was the opportunity. We bought a building at $40 a square foot, 2.5 acres, right near the Beltline, which had not fully formed at that point, but was under development. Jamestown was developing Ponce Market, a multi-$100 million development that still hadn't fully formed yet. And so the buy was good. But it was beyond that. It was the creativity of getting rooms into that hotel that felt comfortable enough and exciting enough for the average hotel goer to accept and really to stand out. In a market as big as Atlanta, what we provided was a product that did not exist in a true lifestyle format. There were plenty of independent boutique, but none of the caliber that we had experienced in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Miami, New York, Chicago. There wasn't that defining hotel to us that really was just like so memorable you want to buy the hat and wear it. And that, to me, that's it, right? You can be a cool hotel, but until somebody is going to want to wear that hat, everyone's like, oh man, that place is awesome. We had the best night there. That is the differentiator, right? The t-shirt and the hat that you want to wear proudly, not that you just buy because you didn't have a hat for the day, like at the Four Seasons playing golf or something,
and yeah, and most hotels that you would stay at, there's no desire to buy a t-shirt or a hat after your stay, right? Because in a way, your guests are buying that t-shirt or hat. I think that's a great metric, by the way, because they're buying that because they had a memory, right? And they want to carry that with them and wear it and talk about it or not. And so in that idea of creating memories, if you were to look at your portfolio of hotels, like what's a great example of that kind of idea of hospitality where you're imprinting a memory or your guests can create like a really wild memory?
Trying to think of the right answer to the question. I think I'll speak kind of broadly and then kind of narrow it in. Broadly, because our hotels and really anybody else that's in the kind of boutique hotel business or hotel business at full service in general, a larger proportion of your revenue is coming from food and beverage than ever before. What used to be 20% became 30, became 40. Now we're at 50. I mean, there's some hotels that are doing 60% F&B revenue.
And most of it is the B, not the F, correct?
It better be most of the B than the F, because the B is really where you're making your money. And anybody in the restaurant business knows that. If you stop drinking at a restaurant, they're going to go out of business. So our hotels tend to be in that 50% camp. And for your listeners who don't know, F&B is food and beverage, and beverage, tends to have a much higher margin on it than does food. Your cost of goods sold with food is, call it, industry standard. You still use 32%, and beverages in your 15 to 20% camp.
Wow,
depending on what it is. So we tend to try to keep our guests entertained, and really we look at everything as the layer cake. In Atlanta, it's start your evening off at the lobby bar, and then you go to Tiny Lou's one level below for a meal at our French restaurant. Then after that, head to the rooftop for views of the city and another kind of post-dinner cocktail. And then after that, call it 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, head down into the sub-basement at the Clermont Lounge. And so we're keeping folks entertained, in what we call a layer cake, or I guess you could even call it a cruise ship. Keep people on board and moving around. So I think the Clermont is the best example of that. At the Fairlane in Nashville, we try to create kind of multiple memory outposts. A lot of folks have a brand guide, right, that has colors and, what's your voice? I tend to look at it as like, who's our character and what's our character doing? So at the Fairlane in Nashville, because it was a 1972 bank headquarters for Fidelity Federal Savings and Loan, and it was this beautiful travertine 13-story building. It was. I mean, you couldn't build this thing today; it'd be too expensive. And we just imagine this chairman, CEO of the bank, strolling in, and you've got this like 70s kind of like New York seedy, and not being seedy, but kind of this kind of fogged over delicatessen window you might encounter in Chicago or New York or Philadelphia. And so you go in there for your coffee and your hand-rolled bagel, and then you go to your room. And after your room, you go for a cocktail on the fourth floor at Ellington's, which is our kind of homage to 1970s power lunches, in the vein of like, windows of the world to the World Trade Center, but kind of dumbed down a little bit. And then once your day is well over, you rise up to the penthouse, which beyond just being a rooftop bar was kind of this like Will Chamberlain 70s like wild penthouse experience, and you can kind of hang out in the CEO's penthouse overlooking the city. So it's really just taking the guest through a journey. It very much like a kind of live action theatrical performance through multiple venues. And that's really the art side of the business that really creates those memories.
I love the idea of the layer cake. And I want to dig into that, the B part of the F&B. So if 50 to 60% of the revenue of one of your properties is coming from the F&B, when you look at the net operating income or the profit, the net profit margin, or however you want to describe it, what percent of the bottom line, so to speak, if 50 to 60% of your gross is on the from the F&B, where does that wind up down at the bottom? Like what percent of the net?
12 to 15% margins on a full service upscale restaurant is good, right? 10%, some people might say is good as well. So you definitely have a much greater margin on the hotel rooms. And so you'd rather be in the rooms business than the F&B business, but you really have no choice but to be in the food and beverage side, given that it enhances. People are going to spend more on the hotel room when they know they're going to have a great food and beverage experience. And you can only sell a room once per night, right? But you could have, you could have 3 deep at the bar. So really your revenue is somewhat maxed out in a sense on the room side. Once you hit, most hotels, never exceed 70% occupancy for the year. So that's kind of your standard. And your rate is really derived as a function of, demand and competition in the market. But the food and beverage is really the variable for any hotel. You could project 3 million in F&B and all of a sudden it's 6 or 7. And you could, project, 7 or 10 and you get a dud and it's only 2 or 3. And you get some very angry investors along the way. But that's the high and the low of F&B is it can make or break a hotel. And it's a necessary evil. But yes, the margins are much stronger on the events side of the business. Events is right up there, and then rooms, and then beverage, and then food at the bottom.
Got it. So of all the deals that you've done and repositioned and created these memory making locations, if you can control the one thing, which is the buy, so to speak, of all of those, which one do you think you bought the best?
Bought the best. Well, if you look purely by number, the project we're in California, we took over a state park for 55 years, and the state of California gave it to us. It's a concession agreement, and so we don't own it, but we operate it. And so there was no transaction cost in getting into the project. But in return, we had to put in significant millions of dollars into it. So that one probably is the best buy because there was no buy. It's an operating agreement. The Oliver, again, kind of post-recession pricing back 12 years ago, was a good buy. The Clermont was a good buy. Honestly,
all of them.
I think all of our projects is what has been good for us and our investors over the years has been a very good basis on every project. And so at this point, we've never had a loss in our kind of short career so far. And so we haven't hit home runs every time. I don't think anybody ever has. We've had our highs and our kind of mediocre, but we've never had a total loser.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of that rests on the fact that we've been very patient. We haven't been forced to put out money or to buy, as you might feel if you were a REIT or you had a fund. And so we end up just sitting back and being way more opportunistic. The other part of our business that's been good to us is that, and it will change as we get larger, but we've always kind of been in that middle market space. At first we were buying properties in the $1 to $3 million range, and then we were in the 5 to 10, and now we're in the 10 to 20 to 30 to 40. But it gets even more competitive at the institutional level, at the 50 to $150 million level.
Mm.
But even at that point, you could buy something well and do even better. So hotels and the hotel business is one that is it's either the fifth or the sixth food group. Whether or not you count it as real estate or as an operating business, certainly it's an asset class that everybody wants to get into, but most people don't know how to operate in. And so there's a lot of opportunity to buy a property that is not performing for one reason or another. And if you have a way to fix it, there's tremendous upside and value that can be created. But at least right now, we end up operating in that middle market. It's too small for the big guys, too big for the small guys, and they tend to be in markets where the average person might be doing a branded hotel, or maybe isn't willing to be as big of a risk taker as we are to kind of go for it and do something as crazy as we have in the past.
As you're talking, what I'm visualizing is my trip to Cooperstown many moons ago, and looking at the strike zone that Ted Williams had, where he would, there was like a heat map for like the pitches that he would take. And I feel like you're in this place that's almost like not a no man's land, but it's like it takes a certain, as Liam Neeson would say, a certain set of skills. I have a very specific set of skills where, you're good with the people, you're good with the finance, you're good at bringing all that stuff together, but it's that glutton for punishment to really push it forward and make it work. On a valuation question, more jokingly, for Knoxville, did you see the valuation increase after they fired Lane Kiffin?
It's funny. Every year, somebody comes up to me going, "Oh man, that hotel must be worth a fortune now that our scoring's gotten better." It is the funniest thing that we get into these projects in SEC towns. We just opened a hotel up last month in Oxford, Mississippi, also called the Oliver Hotel, but of Oxford. Kind of our first, entry into kind of the brand making. It was another 3-story brick building right off the downtown square, and we thought, in an SEC town, and we thought, this is another Oliver. And everyone came to us and said, "Oh my God, you guys are going to kill it! During the football games, you must make a fortune." I go, "Guys, the football games represent 6 or 7 weekends. I got 52 weekends and 365 days. That does not pay the bills. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
It feels good. Everyone's like, man, you're making a mint." And then every year they're like, "Man, you must be suffering this year," because those towns do live and die by the success of their team. So
Yeah.
I'll support any good decision when it comes to the sideline play.
Good. Fire Lane is all I got to say. Anyway, moving on. As you and Philip, and actually I really want to have Philip on. I think it'll be really cool to interview Philip too, because then we could get the he said, she said, we'll compare notes. We'll try and keep him in a compartment so he's not listening. But as you look forward, and you and Philip look forward, like what you're seeing out there with this really challenging rate environment and inflationary environment, I also think that's the time to find the most opportunity if you're a shrewd operator. But what's exciting you most about the future?
A few things. One is, in the last 36 months, our call it our brain trust, our corporate team, my trusted colleagues, we have grown our ranks. And so we have a phenomenal new colleague who's our COO. Chad Abramson used to be with 21C Hotels, running their operations for a decade until they sold to Accor. I can go on and on.
Investing in leaders.
Investing in leaders, Ashley and Sondra and Brandy and I mean, there's everyone has their place, and we're only as good as the team working together. So what is exciting for me is that I hopefully can spend less time called it doing the paperwork and doing more time out there trying to find opportunities for our team. And what they're excited about is growing the company. When we're not growing, everyone gets bored real fast. They all say they want to break, but we're all gluttons for punishment. We love, everyone loves an opening. It gets everyone together. It's a little scary, but I'm excited about continuing, being in acquisition mode, enhancing our current properties, finding opportunities to tweak the formula, the programming. But earlier, you mentioned as part of your question that we're kind of in a stalemate, frozen capital market situation right now, and it is affecting anyone who's in the hotel space, or frankly, the real estate in general. It's very challenging today to raise equity and debt for projects. We actually bought the old Grand Hotel of Knoxville last year, 160,000 square feet. It'll be almost 170 keys, ballroom, rooftop, you name it. Beautiful property. So we're currently trying to raise capital for that project beyond the acquisition. And, anybody wants to partake in Knoxville, welcome to call me.
Have you tried Dolly Parton?
I have not tried Dolly, but I am planning on going to Dollywood with the kids for fall break. So, maybe that's my entry point is I'll go to your resort if you come to mine. And beyond that, we have slowly but surely made our way into third-party management because it's a way for us to expand our revenue base as the management company, and we can bring on more people, give people more opportunity. So if we don't have, and for those people who don't know what that means is, in the hotel space, there are people who license, call it brands or reservation systems, the Hiltons, the Marriotts of the world. There are people who develop properties, developers, owners, and then there are management companies. And unlike a lot of other businesses, there are management companies that just manage hotels, and there are development companies that don't manage, they just own hotels. And so it's very segmented. We tend to be vertically integrated. And so we are exploring several third-party opportunities where we can come in and help people who want to get into the boutique hotel space, who might own a building, or they're looking to buy a building. They're going, we don't know anything about this, and we can say, hey, look at our portfolio. If you like what you see, we could probably do it for you too.
Okay. That's awesome. Because I think as difficult as the environment is, I think it's also a time for finding some real gems, diamonds in the rough, if you will. One last thing I just wanted to quickly touch on is, as far as excitement for the future and building investing in your leaders and building it, like the investment side. Yeah. Okay. There's, you're investing in the people with money and salaries and benefits and all that. But I think one of the things that in a lot of these conversations I have is the investment in time in the next round of leaders that you're bringing on. So for you and Philip as like founding partners, what are ways that you invest your time in the new leaders and from like a coaching perspective, or like, how do you guys do that so you can get the things out from between your ears into them? From your, like, how do you share your experience so that you can shorten their journeys?
We have people that have been with us for a long time. I just came back from, like I mentioned, from California yesterday. I was with my colleague, Craig Bradford, who's an unbelievable kind of brilliant engineer, and really he kind of helps take the insanity of some of these retrofit projects. The old kind of call it old busted motel, and kind of turn around. This is like instead of Restaurant Impossible, this is like Hotel Impossible. I tend to work best with people who are, call it adults, who are professional, who are 110% invested, who also don't sleep well at night because they're thinking about how to solve that problem. And so I love mentoring. If you asked me to help you with something, I'd probably spend all day, looking into it and giving you all, I'd give you all my notes. But I think Philip and I both tend to work with people who are just as excited as we are and love to nerd out on all this minutia. The other thing that I think we both do, at least I do, is I try to work harder than anybody else. And I think, if I'm working hard, other people are going to be like, oh shit, Ethan's doing that. I better keep up. And I don't do that to encourage people. I just do that because I have no other life but this hotel life I live in. And so I think when people see that intensity, when we first started this business, Philip and I were spray painting frames gold for Knoxville, because we bought them like frames.com. We had to spray these things, and our fingerprints are all over them in all the rooms. Yesterday I was in California. I mean, I was schlepping tables on my head down the road into the rooms because somebody had to do it. And we're opening this week, and call me frugal or dumb, or maybe I'm not a great delegator, but I believe that if you're willing to work hard, people are going to be attracted to that. The right people are, and they're going to be working hard right alongside you.
Yeah. I think a lot goes to say, like, charging up the hill, like literally charging up the hill and not pointing, leading your teams up. It goes a tremendous way. Ethan, this has been awesome. I really want to get Philip on. I think it would be really fun to have Philip on now, and like it'll be great. And also, just like, I don't think I've had part business partners on in the past 2 years. And as different as you are as people, like, you're so similar in so many different ways, right? And obviously you have to be as partners, and to do all the great things that you've done. Like, there's like definite alignment and synergy, which goes without saying. But this has been so fantastic. If other people wanted to like reach out and learn more about you, your hotels, or Oliver, or anything, like what's the best way for them to get you?
Probably through oliverhospitality.com, which is our hospitality company website. Or they're welcome to email me directly at ethan@oliverhospitality.com. And a myriad of ways, LinkedIn, etc.
Great.
I'd be happy to discuss.
We'll put all that. We'll put that in the show notes. Hey, we've known each other for a really long time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Ethan, and I just want to say thank you, a wholehearted thank you, for investing your time and sharing your experience with everyone else. It's just so awesome. I get such great feedback when I have people on and they share their experience. I really believe it shortens other people's journeys. So thank you very much for sharing.
Dan, it's kismet that we're here back together. It's great to see you and be able to kind of hang out with you in this context. And I look forward to seeing you in person here soon.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd be remiss without thanking our listeners. Without you, I wouldn't be sitting here with Ethan, and Philip would probably say, no, I don't want to talk to you. But thank you. Thank you, listeners. We appreciate you all. And Philip, I appreciate you too. But Ethan, really, thank you.